Spirit of a Nation. A Kansas City Warlock Weekly story. Written by M.N. Jolly. Narrated by Nicola Hamilton. Chapter 1. Uh-huh. Yes. Yep. Uh-huh. An explosion? I tilted my head. Explosions were always good for headlines, and good headlines sold newspapers. Yeah, I can be there in 15 minutes. Hanging up, I eyed the cold brew still in front of me. I'd only drank half of it, despite taking up a table at the cafe for more than an hour while I worked on the Sunday paper's layout. The ice had melted, but I threw it back anyway. No need to be wasteful. Saving my work, I packed up my laptop, put on my helmet, and half-jogged out the door. Something magical had exploded down on 12th Street. "Computer," I instructed, revving up my bike. I felt in an ironic musical mood. Play Kansas City. Contrary to popular belief and the rather iconic song I just put on my playlist, there is no 12th Street and Vine in Kansas City. We had 12th Street and we had Vine Street, but renovation in the 60s had changed the intersection and the two paths no longer crossed. More generally, the legacy of 12th as a place of clubs and bars had been relegated to history. Nowadays, you had your fair share of small businesses, a church or two, some smallish apartment buildings, and single-family houses. The clubs were still around, they just lived a few blocks down on 16th. I thought I might need to stop and put the address into my GPS once I got close, but that wasn't necessary. I spotted the burned-out car from a block away. The hatchback sat with the rear door open. A thick layer of rainbow soot caked the Corinthian leather upholstery, and though it looked like the fire hadn't spread beyond the trunk and seats, the interior that I could see was wrecked. Someone was inspecting the damage, arms planted on her hips. Probably frustrated. I'd be frustrated too if it were my car. Dropping my kickstand, I hopped off my bike, clipped my helmet to my backpack, and approached, taking out my notepad. "Miss Selby?" She turned around, and only once I saw her face did I realize it wasn't Miss Selby. "Oh, no," Mariah said, eyes narrowing. "No. What the hell are you doing here?" I got a call," I stammered. "Is Miss Selby here?" "She's inside. You can leave." Mariah stared at me, right in my eyes. I looked for an escape. The smallish house in front of us was the best option I had. "I should let her know I'm here." Mariah was a combination bartender and potion dealer, and she didn't like me very much, to put it mildly. I couldn't exactly blame her. I'd accused her of murdering a friend and burglarized her office in the same afternoon. But it posed problems nonetheless. If she knew crucial details about the story that nobody else did, I wouldn't be able to get all the facts that I needed. No facts meant no story. No story meant no column about the rainbow potion explosion, and I couldn't just not run a story about a rainbow potion explosion. Hopefully, Miss Selby would be able to fill me in. Knocking on the door, I waited a few moments, glancing back at Mariah. She continued to glare daggers my way. "Oh, you must be Levi." I turned, facing a woman wearing a clean t-shirt and stained, burned pants, smudges of soot on her face. She'd pronounced my name wrong, and though it would have been easier to let it slide, I stubbornly corrected her. "Well, you say it Levy, like Chevy, but yes. Miss Selby?" Wiping her forehead, she sighed. "Call me Tia, Levy. I take it you saw the damage?" "Yes, I paused, reaching for my phone. "Do you mind if I record our conversation?" She nodded. "Well, sure. You're going to print it, right?" "That's the plan." I opened the recorder. "So, what happened?" "I had ordered a flat of potions from Mariah," Tia explained. "She's got a deal on energizing potions going right now. You ever have an energizing potion?" "Not unless you count coffee," I admitted. Tia barked out a laugh and shook her head. Like a full night's rest and a bottle when they work right. She must have cut corners, because I get home from picking up my order, and when I go to carry the crate inside, the bottles start to explode. I shit you not, they shatter like eggs in a microwave, and the sludge catches as soon as it touches the floor mats. I'm lucky I didn't get killed. She shot a dirty look over my shoulder, and I swallowed, doing my best to maintain journalistic impartiality. Were you hurt? A couple burns, and I had to get my wife to leave work in the middle of her shift and go pick up our kids, Tia added. Mariah's got to pay to fix it, or I'll take her ass to small claims court and make her pay. I frowned. I knew for a fact that Mariah couldn't be at fault for improperly brewed potions, but I had no good way to explain that to Tia without breaking a promise. Let me go talk to her and get some pictures of the damage. She looked past me, eyes narrowing. Sure. I turned my back on her and got a faceful of Mariah's harshest glare. I just hoped she didn't intend to slug me if I got too close. Walking from the doorway to the car, I pitched my voice low. So, we both know this wasn't a mistake with your brewing. Asshole, she shot back. Am I wrong? Her brow furrowed angrily. No. The secret was known to only a handful of people, and I'd only learned it through a bit of less than legal investigation, digging into a completely unrelated story. I'd been under duress at the time. Don't get on my case about it. Mariah's potion brewing rig had fallen apart after a mix-up with reagents, and when she couldn't afford to replace or repair it, she'd just started buying potions from a wholesaler and swapping the labels. It was possible that the whole brew was tainted. If that was the case, I'd be able to find reports of other potions exploding. Alternatively, it might not have been the potions at all. Any idea what caused this? I asked. I'd like to clear your name if I can. I owe you. You want to do me a favor? Then back the hell off, Mariah hissed. I don't like you. I paused, trying to think of another line of questioning that could make progress. Do you have any more potions with you? What? I'd like to buy one. She stared at me, eyes wide, incredulous. Why? To see if it happens again, not... I started to explain, quickly, before she could chew me out a second time. Not because I think there's something wrong with your potions. I want to figure out if it's something that has to do with this place. Mariah blinked a few times, then shook her head. Did you hear what I said about backing the hell off? Or do I need to repeat myself? Heard, but disregarded, I said, walking over to my bike and raising my voice so she could still hear me. I'm following this story. Will a cleansing crystal ruin the potion, by the way? Mariah shook her head. You're an ass. But no, they'd just be inert, temporarily, till you take the crystal away. I'll pay for the potion, I pointed out, digging in the pouch at the back of my motorcycle and retrieving the blue-green crystal that I always kept with me in case of magical emergencies. I couldn't do much magic, but simple cleansing was comfortably within my wheelhouse. Look, I'll be doing this experiment either way. This just saves me having to pick one up from their retail center. I like to buy local. Scowling, Mariah shook her head. I'm not going to help you get footage you can use to smear me. I threw up my hands. Mariah, if I wanted to smear you, well, nothing you say after that is going to help your case, buddy, Mariah interrupted. Just go. This isn't news. I sighed and set my shoulders, resigning myself to a backup plan. Trudging back to the house, I waved to Tia. What did she say? Tia asked. Is she gonna pay me? I don't know, but I don't think it's her fault either, I said. I need to test something, though. Do you have any other potions on hand? Tia glared past me. I tensed, still wanting to avoid the crossfire of their feud. One or two. They're her brew. I'd like to see what happens if we take one outside, I said. See if it explodes like the others, and record it if it does. So you want to waste one of my potions? I shook my head. If it explodes, it wouldn't be safe to drink anyways, would it? Seeing my point, Tia relaxed and shrugged. Fine. Here, they're in the kitchen. I followed her through the small front room to a cluttered kitchen. Dishes were stacked up in the sink, soaking in scummy water, and fast food paper waste and old pizza boxes were cluttering the counters. While Tia bent to get the potion, I palmed the crystal and activated it, and I felt the hint of growing warmth in my hand as it ordered the currents of power around me, dispersing the static magic that naturally occurred in the air. Once that was running, I took out my phone and turned on the video camera. I wouldn't be able to use the footage directly. The Commonwealth of Wizards barely tolerated a print paper. They'd hex my work into nonsense if I tried to broadcast any videos. But I could pull stills and use the video for my own reference. Tia passed me a glass bottle with an ambiguous pinkish liquid sloshing inside, and I began filming. Okay, I said, both for her benefit and the camera's. I'm going to take this outside, turn off the cleansing crystal, and see how it reacts. Holding the bottle out gingerly in case it shattered and threw glass shards at me, I walked out. Tia followed behind, shutting the door as we stepped out onto the front walk. So, what do you think did it if it's not Mariah's... Asshole, Mariah shouted. She was apparently in the middle of talking with someone on her phone, but she lowered it to shout at me. What the hell are you doing? I lowered my own device. Recording the response. Really? Really? She demanded, marching up the driveway. You are that eager to screw me? Oh yeah, he's the bad guy. Tia shot back, stepping forward to confront Mariah. It's your awful brewing that caused this. Are you going to fix this, huh? Pay for the damage to my car? My brewing didn't do this, Tia, Mariah objected. And no amount of bitching. Your potions exploded. My potions didn't. My lawyer, your shitty car. I lost track of the argument in all the yelling. The details didn't seem to be materially relevant. They were in a shouting match that cared more for volume than argumentation. At least I'd been momentarily forgotten by Mariah, so that I was only catching the fringes of her tirade and not taking the brunt of it. The fight was so distracting, though, that I didn't notice the crystal getting warm in my hand until it cracked. I frowned, looking down at the shattered cleansing crystal. They weren't an unstoppable anti-magic device. Try and cleanse too much power, they'd get warm and ultimately break. I'd bought a fairly hefty crystal, though, so it would only crack if it was trying to dispel a lot of magical energy. It had been holding something back, which meant... Oh, crap. In my other hand, the bottle shattered violently. Glass shards spraying the front of my jacket and pants. Smoking pink liquid splattered me a moment later, and I dropped what was left of the bottle, hurrying to get out of the jacket. Damn it, I liked this jacket. Smoke billowed into the air, choking and obscuring my vision as I stumbled back, shucking out of my jacket and using it to bat at the flames coming off my pants before they could spread and burn me. While I put out that flame, I heard a scream. It wasn't Tia or Mariah, and, well, I was screaming, but the voice I heard drowned out my own shouting. It barely sounded human, like a voice run through a series of filters to strip it of all identity. Looking up, I saw the figure towering above me. Like the voice, it lacked any specific shape, but a clear something formed in the smoke. A faceless mass, angry and afraid and in pain. I didn't know if ghosts were real, but just then it seemed extremely likely that they were. Mind racing, I tried to decide how to respond to it. I'd only brought the one cleansing crystal, but it didn't seem like it wanted to hurt me. It was mad, but not necessarily mad at me. My internal reporter took over. "Who are you? What do you want?" I called at the apparition. "Why are you here?" I shouldn't have asked so many questions back to back. When the ghost responded, it was only with two ambiguous words. Its tone so loud and grating that it hurt to listen to. "Nation and..." Before I could do much more than cover my ears to block out the pain, the mass of smoke and power began to spread, flattening and shooting out in all directions. The front-facing windows of the house shattered, as though bricks had been tossed through each and every one of them. And then the being was gone. A few little fires smoldered on the lawn, but they all died quickly, burning themselves out without spreading. My charred pants would at least last me until I got home, but my jacket was fully ruined. I swallowed, then spoke, addressing nobody in particular. Well, we know that Mariah didn't cause that. Chapter 2. Commonwealth Dispatch, what do you want? Kennedy, I said, projecting cheerfulness. I'd stepped back into Tia's home, working from her couch while I took care of the immediate crisis. There's a ghost problem in the city. Of course there is, Kennedy sighed. Do I sound like an exorcist? It's not on my property. It's just around, I said, and it was ranting about ending nations. You said it was a ghost? I nodded into my phone. Well, yeah, I think. Then don't worry about it. You're probably just seeing apparitions because of all the new power in the city. Unless it starts manifesting corporeally, it's just a nuisance. Does making windows explode count as corporeal? Kennedy swore under their breath, then spoke more clearly into the receiver. Well, it's probably fine, but this should get nipped in the bud. Let me find the number for our public exorcist. I paused. Exorcist, like priests, crosses, the power of Christ compels you? Exorcist, like we needed a name for people in the Department of Ghost Removal, Kennedy replied. Do you have a pen? No pen, but I can write the number down. Hit me. Within a couple minutes, I'd called the exorcist, gotten her voicemail, and requested a callback. With that done, all I could really do was wait for a reply and get back to my job. Looking up at Tia, I said, I should get out of your hair. It's fine, Tia said, though I saw her shoulders slump in what I interpreted as relief. Do you need anything? A stiff drink? But not until the kids are asleep, Tia snarked. I'll let you know what I hear. Hopefully we can get this business cleared up before anything else goes all shattery. Pushing to my feet, I looked down at myself. I needed to go home, get a shower, and then get back to research. Sorry about your car, and, your windows, and your potions, I guess. Tia raised up the corner of her mouth, but it wasn't properly a smile. Thanks. Leaving the kitchen and tiptoeing around the broken glass in the front room, I made it outside to my motorcycle. Fortunately, the mirrors hadn't shattered, a stroke of luck I didn't think to question. While I got on the bike and started home, I pondered what I'd heard. Nation's end? Or nation end? Was it a warning? A threat? That anxiety sat with me until I got home. And since I still hadn't heard back from the exorcist, I got back to work on my ad layouts. 2 hours later, I got the call back. Picking up my phone, I said, This is Levi, reporter for the Kansas City Warlock Weekly. How can I help you? This is Carolyn Banfield, exorcist for the Commonwealth, Carolyn replied, echoing my greeting. I got your message. How can I help? Well, I found a ghost, I said. It made some potion bottles explode and broke some glass. Dangerous, basically, and I heard you were the person to help. Okay. Do you know who it was? I frowned. No, it just said something like Nation's End, and then it vanished. All right. Well, I heard the rustling of papers on Carolyn's end. I can try to pencil it in for an investigation and exorcism sometime in January? I blinked. That's 5 months from now. It takes time, and I'm swamped. Ghosts manifest more often near ley lines, and nobody thought to maybe increase my department's budget before dropping a huge vein of power right through the middle of my region. She sighed, thinking it over for a moment. Maybe if I knew who the ghost was left by, I could squeeze it in over a lunch break. But if I have to do a full seance to reach out, find their spirit, and then exorcise it. That's going to be at least a day of work, probably 2. I just don't have time." There was something in Carolyn's tone that sounded familiar. I couldn't place the word that went with the emotion, but it resonated with me anyways. "How busy are you exactly?" "I've had 1 day off this month," Carolyn explained, "because I was in the hospital." Dang. I considered that for a moment, then asked, "Is there anything I can do to help?" "I need an assistant, but it's not in the budget," Carolyn said. "Look, I'd love to chit-chat, but I don't have the time. Does January the 14th work for you?" "Sure, but if I figure out who made the ghost, would you be able to come and do it sooner?" I didn't want to overwork Carolyn, but I didn't want Tia to be stuck with an angry ghost for months either. "I guess. Don't try and get it to appear again, though." "Why not?" "Deliberately provoking an aggressive ghost without a means to exorcise it is a good way to get killed," Carolyn explained. "Ghosts tend to relive their final moments, and you typically don't leave a ghost behind if you went out peacefully." "Ah. Honestly, you're probably not going to find it. It could be from any death from 20 years old to 80 years. Basically, the only thing you know is that they died close to where it manifested. Ghosts don't tend to stray." Carolyn sighed. "You'd be better off just waiting if you don't know anything." "I can be persistent," I said. "Why that date range?" "Any younger, the trauma from the death will be too chaotic and muddled to manifest. Any older, it'd have to be intensely single-minded to hang on. It's happened, but only with souls that had a single purpose for their whole life. Zealots, usually, and a couple dogs." I blinked. "There are ghost dogs?" "You know those stories about dogs who guard the grave of their master or wait every day for someone to come home until they pass?" Carolyn asked. I nodded. A second later, I said, "Yeah." "They leave ghosts sometimes. Everything has an essence, and it just takes willpower for that essence to imprint itself on the world. Dogs have a lot of willpower. So yeah, ghost dogs." Carolyn cleared her throat. "Look, I've got to go. I've penciled you in for the 14th. "Thanks." She hung up. With that in mind, I started digging. The most thorough course of action would be to go to the library and start reading through old newspaper archives, looking for any murder cases in the right area. I'd been in the stacks before. That way lay madness. Searching through reams of old newspapers could take months. If I had a digitized set of papers I could dig through, that would help, but the public library's digitized records only reached back to the 90s. Given the date ranges I was working with, that was a non-starter. I did have some colleagues who I was still friends with from my days working at a big daily newspaper. I could maybe get some access to their internal sources if I called in a few favors. I was reluctant to do that. For now, using that resource would be a backup plan. First, I'd lean on the internet. A search for Kansas City Nation's End didn't pull anything up. I tried a few specifics. Kansas City End of Nations, 12th and Vine End of Nations, KC 12th Street Nation's End, a dozen rephrasings that didn't get me anywhere. With all that coming up dry, I began to look for murders. Given the location of the ghost, 12th Street and a couple blocks off Vine, I had a hunch that the ghost would be from before the area got reworked, back when 12th Street still had its centrality in the neighborhood. I centered my research in that date range, looking for any tales of violence between the 20s and the 60s. I got some hits, but nothing seemed to match. Riots in 1968 were close, but it still didn't fit Nation's End. A few other scattered deaths, both deliberate and accidental, didn't seem to line up with a ghost that shattered bottles. I widened my net. Geographically, that particular intersection didn't quite fit, but Kansas City was a big place. There were plenty of areas nearby that could work. Just a few blocks south was an old prison workhouse, the Workhouse Castle. On a hunch, I pulled up the Wikipedia page on it and skimmed through, looking for any grisly stories that might have left behind a ghost. I knew it had been abandoned in the 20s, making it a bit too old for what I was looking for, but I had already decided to cast a wide net. I skimmed all the way down, scanning for keywords. Well, that can't be a coincidence. In 1901, a woman named Carrie Nation was arrested and threatened with time in the workhouse after something described as a hatchetation on 12th Street. The timeline was past 100 years, but I clicked anyway, reading up on more detail. I had to read the phrase radical temperance a couple times for my brain to click with what I was reading. Nation, it seemed, was a teetotaler, and an extreme one at that. She made a name for herself around the turn of the century by going from town to town, sometimes alone, sometimes with an honest-to-goodness hymnal choir on hype squad duties. Wherever she went, she'd bust into saloons, break their windows, and smash their liquor bottles. The ghost had done the same, or near enough to the same. It had gone after windows and potion bottles, but left other glass like my phone screen and rear-view mirrors behind. A quick check confirmed that she'd come to Kansas City, which is how she'd ended up in the workhouse. In fact, she was banned from Kansas City by the courts after her 1901 hatchetation. Carrie Nation on 12th Street with a hatchet. If this was a game of Clue, I'd call it. There were still a couple holes, but they were slight. For one, it was too old for the window of time I'd been given, but that was excusable. Carolyn had mentioned zealots, and Nation was clearly a zealot. But more to the point, if her biography was to be believed, she had died in Leavenworth, 10 years after her downtown hatchetation. That was an issue, but for all I knew, there were exceptions. Maybe ghosts could move, in rare circumstances. Maybe the stories online weren't entirely true, and she'd really come back to Kansas City before she died. Going on the hunch that it wasn't a coincidence, I made a phone call. "The reading room," Mariah said upon answering the phone. "How can I help you?" "Mariah, it's Levi." She hung up. I called back. "It's Levi, still. Just hear me out," I pleaded. "I have an urgent question." "Make me a deal," Mariah snapped. "I answer this question, you leave me alone." Fine. I wasn't sure what sort of time frame she meant. Did she want me to leave her alone for a while or forever? Regardless, I accepted the terms for now. How similar are potions and liquor? What do you mean? Let's say there was a ghost of a woman who liked to smash up bars, I said, speaking purely hypothetically. Would it be easy for a ghost like that to mistake your potions for whiskey? It's all brewing, Mariah said. With the right ingredients, you could make a solid, hard-grained something or another with the rig I use. The main difference is that for potions, you invest them with specific, ordered intent, and all that purpose gets stored by ingredients attuned to that power. Most alcohol doesn't have power in it at all, and even when it does, it's chaotic. Wait, you can make alcoholic potions? I asked. So like Viking berserkers who drank before a battle? We're probably drinking potions, maybe on purpose, maybe by accident. Historically, it's not uncommon for brewmasters to put a lot of their will into their work, and it helps if there's collective belief. Enough people think a drink will make them stronger, and that will can sort of align it, so that the chaotic power becomes organized. Like magnets aligning poles in iron, I said, nodding as I understood. Sure, like magnets. Mariah's answer was casual, but her tone remained tense. I've answered your question, Levi. Right. Thank you. Bye. I hung up. So, Carrie Nation's ghost, ender of both whiskey and potions. I knew in my gut that I was right. Holes in the story be damned. Now we just needed to do an exorcism. Chapter 3. With my revelation about the ghost's identity, Carolyn was able to make an appointment for Monday. I volunteered to tag along, in part because I could help set up the ritual circle, but mostly because I wanted to record it for an article. When Monday evening rolled around, I found myself pouring salt onto Tia's lawn, surrounded by illusions to keep our work secret from the mundane world. "Just a big circle, right?" I asked, shaking the mason jar gently to sprinkle the salt out without just dumping it everywhere. "And then I'll draw a symbol in the middle," Carolyn confirmed. "Once the ritual starts, under no circumstances can anyone cross the circle. Nation's ghost will be inside, we'll be outside, and it needs to stay that way." "Okay, got it." "No, you don't." Carolyn shook her head. "Nobody crosses the line. Period. We're shaking up a champagne bottle, and the circle's a cork. If it comes loose with all the energy coming from the well of power just a couple miles away, Nation's ghost might be strong enough to manifest." "Manifest?" I frowned, setting aside the now empty jar and reaching for my notepad. "Take on a physical form and seek out retribution for whatever perceived injustice is keeping the echo of her life around." Carolyn shivered. "It's terrifying." "She'd just be an old woman, though, wouldn't she?" I asked, uncertain what would make that so scary. "An old woman made of pure willpower, driven by raw emotion. Ghosts don't have sense, and they don't have mortal limits. Echoes of willpower that have the force to manifest are by definition strong. They're all but impossible to destroy, and they do nothing except act out the thing that they need. And in Nation's case, that need was to smash things with a hatchet because she thought it was God's will. How would you stop it?" "Blast it with a magical nuke?" Carolyn suggested. "Or wait until it possesses the nearest compatible person, then kill the person." "The nearest compatible person?" "Someone who's similar in body type, age, temperament, that sort of stuff. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be something the ghost would recognize as close to itself." I considered it. "In this case, wouldn't that be you?" "So," Carolyn concluded, "nobody crosses the line." I tilted my head. "Has that ever happened during an exorcism you were doing?" Carolyn looked very tired when I asked her that. She already looked very tired, actually, but the weight on her shoulders seemed to press down even further, and the bags under her eyes took on an extra layer of depth. "Once." I decided to drop the subject. While I finished sprinkling the salt, Carolyn took 4 objects from a bag: a bottle of whiskey, a rocks glass, a hatchet, and a King James Bible. On one end of the circle, she set the whiskey and the glass, on the other, the hatchet and the Bible. "What are those for?" I asked, aiming my pen at the objects. Carolyn pointed first at the alcohol accessories. "The stuff she's mad about?" She moved her gesture to the other side of the circle. "The stuff that drove her." "Don't you need 5 items so you can make a pentagram?" I asked. 4 objects and a channeler," Carolyn corrected, directing a thumb at herself. "Me." "So, you're going to call her up, resolve her trauma, and send her on to, what, the afterlife?" Carolyn shook her head again. "Ghosts aren't people. They aren't the souls of the ones who left them behind. They're just echoes. I'm going to make the ghost appear, and then I'm going to obliterate it so it stops causing trouble." That made me wince. Years of media about ghosts had me convinced that they were something akin to people, and just demolishing them felt uncomfortable, even if it was less murder and more firefighting. While Carolyn finished preparing the circle, I walked up to the house, rapping twice on the door before opening it and calling inside, "We're about to get started." Tia responded, yelling from somewhere deep inside. "I'm putting the kids to bed. Do you need something?" "No, I just wanted to let you know." "Is it going to be loud?" "Shouldn't be." "Okay." I stood in the doorway a moment, then stepped back out. "It's Not going to be really loud, is it? Auditory buffer spell. The illusion I set up isn't just visual, Carolyn confirmed. First thing you get taught on the job is how to keep things discreet. Cool. I half-jogged over to the circle, checking that the handycam I'd set up on a cheap tripod was still recording. The image quality wasn't great, but I wasn't doing TV news here. I just wanted something for my own reference, so when I wrote this up, I wouldn't have to be relying purely on my memory. How wide is the illusion? Your camera will work fine, she promised, walking a wide orbit around the salt circle, looking for flaws. Good to know. Once this gets started, I'll just stand back and let you work? Carolyn nodded curtly, sitting down and adopting a meditative cross-legged position at the point of a star she'd drawn inside the circle. She was sitting back just a couple inches, close enough that she could have reached out and run her finger through the salt circle without leaning forward. She shut her eyes and started speaking softly in Latin, and I just stayed back and watched, glancing around to ensure that nobody crept up and broke the circle while we were watching. Carrie Nation, Carolyn bellowed, her voice an octave lower and echoing like it was running through a filter. The magic had started. Carrie Nation, I call you. Carrie Nation, stand before me. I expected the ghost to take shape inside, but the only motion was the salt, which vibrated as though it rested on an active subwoofer. Carolyn's face hardened, and she redoubled her efforts. Carrie Amelia Nation, your cause is finished. I could feel her words echoing down into my bones. Glancing around nervously, I expected people to come out of their houses to see what was going on, but nobody did. The auditory illusion did its job perfectly. Carrie Amelia Nation, Carolyn repeated. You cannot persist. Carrie Amelia Nation, face me and accept your fate. The circle began to shift, as though being buffeted by strong winds that couldn't otherwise be perceived. But still, there was no ghost. Carolyn opened her eyes, which had begun to glow pure white. The wind whipped harder, and she rose from the ground with unnatural smoothness, floating above the grass. Spirit, be shown! I could feel the magic in the air, like power coming from high-voltage lines. Spirit, be bound! A glowing circle sprung up from the ground, outlining the salt, showing the power that was being channeled into the exorcism. Spirit, be made manifest! Finally, a ghost appeared. I'd expected a half-transparent copy of Carrie, but the ghost that showed itself in the circle didn't even look human. It resembled a cyclone of fire, burning hot and furious. Carolyn gasped, stumbling back, and the light went out from her eyes. When she spoke again, her voice had returned to normal. What the hell? I rushed to her side, mindful of the circle. What's wrong? That's not Nation, Carolyn said, eyes darting to me with fear and annoyance. You said it was Nation. Then who is it? I asked, watching the torrent of anger build in intensity. I don't know. I can't see its true form, but... Carolyn looked around, her eyes tracing invisible patterns that I couldn't detect. Oh no. Oh no. I looked at the ghost. Is it getting brighter? What's happening? It's... layman's terms, the polarity of the magical field is reversed, Carolyn explained. Instead of having the power drained out of the specter, it's taking power from the world around it. That's bad? The circle won't hold it forever, and when it breaks... Carolyn blinked, shaking her head. Depending on who it's a ghost of, we might already be dead. For all the lights on display, the yard was eerily silent. The raging ghost continued to grow larger, brighter, and more powerful by the second, but it produced no sound save for a subtle whoosh of wind. I stared at it. How long do we have? I made a solid circle, Carolyn said, breathing fast. 2 minutes? Maybe 2.5? Not enough time to call for help, then. What can we do? If I knew who it was, I could maybe seize control again, but it'd have to be fast. If it takes in too much energy, the best exorcist in the world couldn't contain it. She shook her head. I've got some basic incantations I can run through. Broad stuff to deal with ghosts left behind by lust or craving revenge, but... Okay. Think. We can think, I said, even though my own brain was refusing to do just that. I couldn't work the problem. Can we just break the circle now? That'd definitely kill one of us. The ghost certainly has enough power to manifest, and there's no coming back from a possession like this, Carolyn said, taking a couple steps back. Power formed in her hands, visible as a faint glowing orb. But even as it appeared, it got siphoned away, pulled into the circle. The force had grown too strong to fight it, but now she couldn't even conjure magic to slow the process. I tried to think of something helpful. Okay, maybe... questions. Thinking. Okay. Why is the polarity flipped? I don't know. Carolyn shook her head, horror in her eyes. Just give me a guess. Doesn't need to be precise. If the objects we placed had the wrong meanings, Carolyn suggested. Maybe we got it backwards, and the ghost is mad about the hatchet and driven by the booze. Swap them around, then? I asked, but looking down I already saw the problem. The objects were inside the outer ring of salt. They couldn't be moved without breaking the circle and spelling our deaths. I heard a popping, crackling noise. It was difficult to put my finger on what the sound reminded me of, but the closest comparison I could think of was a video of an enormous glacier cracking as heat and pressure broke it down. The sound that preceded a world-altering avalanche. Okay, maybe a bartender who was mad at Nation? You'd have to be really passionate about whiskey to leave behind a ghost over it, Carolyn said. People get passionate about it. I couldn't help but smile thinking about it. You should see how mad Mariah gets about her potions. She poured her soul into... I stopped. It couldn't be that simple, could it? What? Carolyn snapped. Does something have to be living to leave behind an echo? I asked. Like, can something inanimate make a ghost? That doesn't happen. Doesn't or can't? Carolyn looked at me with wide eyes, like I just asked her, why isn't the sky green? Hurry, I snapped, trying to break her out of the stupefaction my absurd questions had placed her in. In theory, maybe it could, but you'd need an incredible amount of passion poured into an object, Carolyn explained. In front of her, the air itself cracked and reformed, shards of magic shooting away from the barrier and then reforming as the furious ghost tried to escape its prison. But you'd need more than one person could give. Too much power is lost in the transfer. What about an heirloom? I asked. Something priceless. Maybe. What the hell are you getting at? Carolyn asked. I told her. Her wide-eyed look of incredulity didn't go away, but she said, I don't have a better idea. I turned to face the circle. If this kills me, I said, be sure someone feeds my cat. Likewise, Carolyn replied. Swallowing, I stepped forward, crouched, and reached through the circle. The summoning circle broke, and the welled-up power burst out with sudden, sharp force, like a watermelon squeezed by too many rubber bands. Before the ghost could go out and wreak havoc, though, I seized the whiskey bottle, raised it up, and plunged it into the mass of the looming spirit. I grinned stupidly as flashing energy coursed around me with a high-pitched shriek. Spirit. Finding its compatible vessel, the ghost took all its manifested energy and dove inside, light and power raging, until it had completely subsumed its target. Not me or Carolyn, but the bottle in my hand. The ghost wasn't left behind by a person. It was left behind by a whiskey. Light and power vanishing, the ghost disappeared, until all that was left behind was the bottle in my hand. Overtop its physical label, another flickering specter could be read. The ghost of a bottle Carrie Nation had smashed. So, I began, looking up at Carolyn. I guess I was right. Never again, Carolyn groaned, panting for breath. Never again am I listening to someone else's investigation. You know we almost died. Yeah. I rubbed at the back of my neck, feeling sheepish. My bad. You're bad? Carolyn's shoulders slumped and she threw her hands into the air, turning to pace in the yard. I'm retiring. I can't do this anymore. We need to deal with this first, I said, holding up the bottle. How should we, make it safe? By satisfying what it wants, Carolyn said, reaching out and snatching the bottle from my hands. Which is to be drunk. Will it taste like itself or like whatever the ghost tasted like? I asked. As much power as it took in? The ghost, probably. Though I've never tasted possessed hooch before. Carolyn shrugged. Why? Read the label, I prompted. Carolyn did, and blinked. Oh, damn. No wonder it left a spirit behind. Putting a hand on the cork, she added, Well, bottoms up? Wait. I shook my head, stepping forward to stop her. Hold on. Is it stable for half an hour or so? Possessions are indefinite, if dangerous, Carolyn assured me. But since the bottle can't move under its own power, it's harmless, so it should last as long as we want. Great. I walked back up to the house, rapping on the door. Is it over? What? Tia answered the door, stopping mid-sentence to stare at me. What on earth happened to you? I didn't have any reflective surfaces nearby, so I pulled out my phone, using the rear-facing camera to look at myself. My hair had been blown back like I'd been run through a tornado, and my skin had gone pink, almost sunburned. The exorcism took a weird turn. Can you get away from the house for an hour? What for? Tia asked. Building bridges, I explained. And I want to get you that drink. No. Get out, I finished as I cleared the bottom stairs of the reading room. I know. I just wanted to bring you a peace offering, then I'll be out of your hair. Mariah eyed me. It was a slow night, with only a few patrons at her combination speakeasy and potion shop, but all eyes were still on our drama as she said, No peace offering from you's gonna fix anything. Oh, it's not to fix stuff with me. I shook my head, then nodded behind me. It's for you to share with Tia and Carolyn. I stepped forward, making space for the two women to follow behind. Carolyn was just along for the ride. It was Tia that I really wanted to be there. Tapping a finger on the counter, Mariah glanced between Tia and me. What is it? Crossing the 4 paces from the landing to the bar's edge, I set the bottle down on the table. The ghost, I explained. It needs someone to drink it to put it at ease. I figured you'd want the opportunity. Scanning the label, Mariah read the flickering, ghostly label aloud. 1799, Mount Vernon Distillery. No. No way. Seriously? This is priceless, Levi. While Carolyn sat down on a stool next to me, I held up my phone to emphasize the quick fact-checking I'd done. I looked it up. Brewery operated by George Washington himself. There were still a couple bottles floating around at the turn of the 19th century when Carrie Nation was doing her whole thing, and, well, yeah. Apparently a bottle with that much history can leave behind a ghost. And since it died by being shattered, it relived that moment by ensuring other bottles experienced the same fate. I shrugged, glancing over at Tia still standing on the landing. So, enjoy. I'll get going, and, sorry. She stared at the bottle, frowning, replying only as an afterthought. Sorry? I didn't know exactly what she was referring to, so I kept my explanation broad. For getting involved, for promising to leave you alone and then coming back. I'll try and keep that promise after tonight. I just didn't want you and Tia to have bad blood over a miscommunication. Rubbing the back of my neck, I gestured to the stairs. So, yeah, I'll get going. I began to leave, and Mariah stayed dumbfounded for a couple seconds. Only as I reached the base of the stairs did she get out glasses, pouring 2 fingers into each for her, Carolyn, and Tia. I'd taken 2 steps up when Mariah called after me. "Levi, wait." "Yeah?" I paused, stooping to look back. There was a 4th glass on the bar top. I smiled, turned around, and pulled up a seat. This has been Spirit of a Nation, a Kansas City Warlock Weekly story. Written by M.N. Jolly. Narrated by Nicola Hamilton. Copyright 2024 M.N. Jolly. Production copyright M.N. Jolly. Thank you for listening.